ability not to be known by the reason, but to be found in the strange vistas of sleep. Something, as we find in their ancient writing, that is to be known by the doing. Now there's an interesting term, that which is to be known by the doing. It looks as though what the Egyptian is reaching for is our concept of experience. That God, that power which is experienced by man when he seeks within himself the source of life. When he moves from the objective to the subjective, he passes into the strange white path of the moon that leads in and away into the secret gardens of hope where the shrine of the great God stands. Altogether, the symbolism, the poetry, the constant recurrence of the strange, subtle drama of these nocturnal ceremonies celebrated upon islands by the lights of torches tell us something of the mystical yearnings and longings and convictions of this ancient people. The fourth deity, or the fourth form of the god, is Osiris Typhon. Now the Egyptian recognized Typhon as the principle of evil, or the principle of destruction. And from his name has come our word, typhoon, the great storm, the tremendous agitation of the elements. Actually, as we have said, the Egyptian did not believe in a principle of evil. He did not believe that Osiris was evil. He believed that Osiris in substance as universal consciousness was infinite good. Yet he makes what he would term evil, or what we regard as evil, as an attribute of this power. It has no separate existence. It is a condition of good. To the Egyptian, Osiris Typhon, represented frequently by the famous water horse, or the hippocampus, the hippopotamus of the Nile, living in water, mud, and slime, a strange, grotesque, ungainly creature, was the proper and natural and inevitable symbol for that broad term we now cover by the word matter. Osiris Typhon was the material or physical world, the physical body of things. We can thus understand why the god is represented with a living head adorned with the plumes of victory, his hands holding the triple scepters of the three worlds, but the lower parts of his body covered with the wrappings of the dead. These wrappings of the dead are the vista or sphere or world of Osiris Typhon, the abode of the dead. Thus, to the Egyptian, the material world was the nearest thing to evil that he could conceive. And yet we have already said that he loved it, that he did not view material life as punishment. He reviewed it, considered it as a natural course of things. Yet he could not fail to realize that this material world is a sphere of conflict, a sphere in which values are frequently obscured, a sphere in which life and death seem to be struggling constantly for dominion. And the great struggle of life and death is the typhoon. It is the tremendous whirlwind in the midst of which man finds himself. After the death of Typhon, who is finally overcome by Horus, this adversary takes upon himself the form of the great serpent Apep. And as the great serpent becomes the seducer, or the tempter, it is this fallen serpent, which occurs again and again in their mythology, And in one of the later forms of the Egyptian ritual, the deity Horus is depicted holding a spear and standing upon the back of the serpent Apep, having driven his spear through the head of the creature. In another case, he is shown standing with one foot upon the serpent's head. And we are reminded of the somewhat similar, though not identical, parallel, that the woman shall bruise the head of the serpent, which we have in our Christian religion, and which becomes much more meaningful if we begin to understand the symbolism of Apep. So Osiris now becomes, rather obviously, the four conditions which make up the world. These conditions being consciousness, intellect, desire, and matter. And there is no doubt in any way that the Egyptian had attained this realization and was fully able to handle its implications and to extend it into the most abstract vistas of philosophy. Man, therefore, born into this world, came under the power of Typhon in one of his phases, attributes, or forms. As such, he became a subject, a vassal, or a servant of the prince of this world. Later, perhaps, the Greek emperors or the Roman Caesars. While here, he must render unto the emperor or to Caesar those things which belong to him. But he also must know that even this material world is part of the body of his blessed God, and therefore his religion and philosophy began to develop ethical and moral overtones. The struggle to restore the glory of his God in matter. The struggle to discover the glory of his God in himself. The Egyptian faced both of these decisions victoriously. He rose to great heights in his contemplation of these mysteries. Probably all Egyptians did not, any more than all peoples of the modern world make the most of their heritage of wisdom. But the priestly classes, the learned, the leaders, were certainly instructed in these matters. Now, after Osiris had been foully murdered by his own alter ego, his own lower self, his inevitable brother, Typhon, and was raised again from the dead through his own son, Horus. He became the Lord of the quick and the dead, judging righteous judgment over the beings of the three worlds. The lifetime on earth, the so-called, or the mortal reign of the god Osiris was 28 years, which was the length of his duration, and which Plutarch suggests may be a subtle allusion to the cycle of the moon. After his death, he was divided. His body was divided into 14 parts. Some say 28 again. These parts were scattered throughout creation. And the pilgrimage of Isis, again, the wife, sister, other self of Osiris, gives us another dimension of this strange belief. When a brother and sister rule in Egypt as pharaohs together, each referred to the other, not as pharaoh, not as brother, not as co-regent, but always as myself in another. This is again the very concept of Isis, who is herself in Osiris. Now, Isis represents in Egyptian mythology one of the two polarities of nature. The Egyptian, looking out around him in the world, beheld nature divided into two parts: nature above him and nature below him. He saw the air and the sky and the stars, and he saw Isis in the form of the goddess Nut, reaching out across the heavens, forming of her own body the pathway of stars. He also realized that the air was full of life, and perhaps full of spirits. He recognized all things growing from the earth into the air, passing therefore from an underworld to an upper world. And the growth toward the air, or upward into the air, was always toward the sun. In the Egyptian mythology, of course, Osiris is a solar symbol. The eye of Horus, or the Osirian eye, of course, is the single eye of the solar orb. Therefore, Osiris, riding in the great ship of the sun, floats across the heavens, diffusing his life and light through the mysterious reaches of the upper atmosphere, the ethers of space, the great sea of heavenly waters which envelops the earth. The sea, water, was anciently called Mari, Mary, Esau, Isis. Therefore, Isis is the great diffusion of ethereal nature through which the sun's eternal energies and life forever flow. Now, Isis has a sister, and this sister is Nephthys. And Nephthys bears upon her head a throne surmounted by a bowl, or a low, shallow dish. This bowl is the symbol of the under half of the earth's surface. Therefore, the above and the below are sisters. And where one ends, the other begins. And the energies which flow through space flow also downward into the earth, which is the abode of Nephthys. And the deity Nephthys later was revived among the Greeks as Hecate, the goddess of the underworld. Nephthys, sister, wife of Osiris, sister of Isis, sister of Anubis, of Typhon, sister and mother, nurse of Horus. All these attributes are interchangeable between Isis and Nephthys. And when Osiris is seated upon the great throne in the hall of the twin truths, as Lord of the quick and the dead, Isis stands upon one side of him and Nephthys upon the other. And they are the ancient counselors, and they are the ones who must say, we are content. The above and the below must agree. The interior and the exterior must agree. The superior and the inferior must agree. And this again perhaps is the basis of the great Hermetic axiom: that which is above is like unto that which is below. That which is below is like unto that which is above. And of this mystery is the generation of all things. Now where the bowl of heaven above meets the rim of earth below, there is the long line of the mountains. Now these mountains, or perhaps only the open sea, but there is the wall between the above and the below. And on this roaring ridge of division between that which is superior and that which is inferior, there stands another deity, who is really the product of the mingling. And this deity is Anubis, born of the sky and the earth, and standing forever upon the horizon of the sun. This is a very profound bit of thinking. For what is Anubis? Anubis is the jackal one, who principally lives in the night and is forever crying in the darkness. Anubis is also the faithful guardian, protector, and friend of the godly family, because after all, he is only again Osiris as Anubis. He is part. He is not another deity. He is another phase of the deity. Now out of light and darkness, the above and the below, and their strange minglings, comes the being who is to be restored to us in one system of mythology after another. In the Grail cycle is Gurnemon, the old knight, who guards the destinies of choirs. In the Arthurian cycle, he is Merlin the magician, who goes to sleep in a house of crystal. In the divine comedy of Dante, he is Virgil, conducting the soul through the mystery of the underworld. In the mystery rituals of the ancients, he was the guide, the instructor, and also the one who vouched for the right of the candidate to advance into the rituals. He is still preserved in secret society rituals of this day. Anubis, then, is old and wise with the wisdom of the sky and the earth, wise with the wisdom that comes from the motion of the sky upon the earth and the earth upon the sky, or the motion of invisibles upon visibles, and contrary. How invisible causes bring visible things into being, and how all visible things change and modify the invisible worlds of which they are a part. So old Gurnemon, or Anubis, is wisdom, standing upon the horizon between light and darkness, the guardian of souls, the protector of the dead. Now when Osiris in his great ship of light passes triumphantly across the sky, accompanied by his retinue of attributes, because all these deities are parts of himself, he rides in a ship that has an eye upon it, because obviously the boat must see the way in which it is going. The Chinese do the same thing. They always put a pair of eyes on the front of their junks, because obviously ships will want to know the proper direction of travel. When the ship comes finally to the great gate of the west, it descends into the underworld. And when it reaches the edge of the underworld, there stands Anubis on the horizon to salute the dying sun of the world and the rebirth of the invisible sun. Now let's realize what happens. For it is said that the sun, when it goes to sleep, or the great ship goes downward beyond the horizon, that it enters into the plains of Alu, the house of shadows. And the house of shadows has 15 gates, leading in all directions. But there are 2 gates that are most great. And one is the gate of the diminishing, or of the departing, which is the great gate of the west. For into that gate passes the solar ship when darkness comes upon the earth. The regency of the world is turned over from the Osirian sun to the Osirian moon. The other gate is the great gate of the dawning, the gate of the east. And in the mysteries of the world of Alu, of all the gates, these are the 2 that the souls of men must most regard. For it is written in the book of the breathings that those who pass to sleep through the gate of the west will after a time depart from the underworld like the great ship of the sun through the triumphant gate of the east. Therefore all things will go down with the sun, will rise with the sun. And all souls that go down into sleep will awaken again when the great ship of the soul reaches the eastern gate of the horizon. Now we realize then, as we study it, that the ship of Osiris is actually the great ship of the doctrines of Eastern Buddhism, particularly of the Mahayana, or the great vehicle. It is also the navis, or great ship of Christendom, because the early cathedrals were fashioned in the form of the structure of a ship. We know that this is the ship of salvation, the ship of the redeemed. And in this ship, with Osiris triumphant, ride the souls of the justified dead. Having therefore somewhat established now our mundane and sub-mundane geography, we can go on to a little more of the psychological phase of this. The land of Alu, the land where the spiders of darkness spin their webs, is like the body of Osiris, divided into 14 parts. These parts are no longer referred to, however, as planes or worlds or states or countries or even counties. These parts are referred to in the Egyptian ritual as houses. Therefore, there are 14 houses of the dead. The 14 houses of the dead are referred to in the book of the Breath of Life. And in it, it is said that in the great land of Osiris there are many houses. And therefore, that in this land there is an abode proper to each and to all. It is almost identically the same statement. In my Father's house are many mansions. And this great land that is guarded by the gates of Alu is called Amentet, which means, literally, the support of Amen. And the word Amen, in this case, is certainly the cause and source of our religious, you might say, formula, or strange invocational word, Amen. Amentet, then, is the land of Amen. Or let there be peace between us would be a proper greeting. Here again we have references to early Ethiopian scriptures, where the priest rising says, I speak with the voice of Amen. This is a Christian priest, for he speaks with the voice, so be it, or the voice of let there be peace. In other words, invoking or stating the presence of a divine power. The claims of Amentet, then, represent the foundations of the peace from the word tet, or tet, which is added. The place or the abode of that which is, so be it. so much it be. And about this, let there be peace. Also, we find in Arabic the continuation of this in connection with reference to the prophet. For whenever a pious Muslim uses the name of the prophet, he always adds his equivalent to this thought. For he says, Muhammad, upon whose name be peace. Let it be so. It is. So be it. And this carries the entire concept, strangely enough, of a mentet, which means the peace of Ammon, or the place which Ammon has provided. The place, so be it. Now, within this tremendous concept of another world or another life, we have many, many divisions. And because of the very same circumstances that affect our modern religious thinking, perhaps the Egyptian was more astute than we are, because instead of saying that heaven is a certain place and having another man disagree with you and saying it is another place, the Egyptian assumed that both men were right, because there was more than one place. You had the place you wanted, another man had the place he wanted. You could not say that heaven is like this or heaven is like that. Heaven is that which is, and so be it. For each man, so be it. It is strangely a world of deserts, of things expected, things presumed to be true. Whereas in the material world, the great hierarchy of the priests, who were referred to in ancient times as the voices of the Great One. Instead of the world of priests ruling over this other world, Osiris was himself the great priest king, the psychopomp of souls, the Pharaoh, the immortal mortal, the God King. This was his world, his land. And why was he there? Because he had been foully murdered. Because he himself had been cast into darkness. Because his heavenly kingdom had been taken from him. And because he felt the great pain of sorrow.